Welcome back to SoundLearn. Today we're going to try to teach you how to do that inside of your computer, but without actually having to play it, and much better than I just did it. Basically, I'm going to try to teach you how to program realistic sounding drums on your computer using MIDI. Sounds difficult, but it's not. It's actually really easy. Let's just get straight into it. Now, if you're watching this and you're like, dude, who uses Pro Tools? What am I going to learn from this? I use Logic or Ableton or any other program. Doesn't matter. This is more about concepts. And as long as you know your way around your program, you should be able to kind of apply these same concepts. So just follow along. Maybe you'll learn something or maybe you won't. If you're just seeing this channel for the first time, I'm just getting started with it. And so if this is remotely helpful to you at all, please like it, subscribe, comment, ask me questions. I'll try to answer them. All right, let's get into it. Easy stuff. First thing we're going to do is make a stereo instrument track. I've already done that. I'm going to open it up, and I've put in a plugin here, a virtual instrument plugin for addictive drums. You could use Easy Drummer. You could use many of the different drums that come with Contact, Native Instruments, stuff like that. As long as you're using a pack that is generally trying to emulate the sound of a realistic sounding drum kit, then this is going to work. This is not necessarily a tutorial for more electronic drum kits, because that's a totally different approach. This is more about how do we make a virtual drum set, convince somebody who's listening on the other side without knowing how it was made that there's a real drummer behind it, you know? So not an easy feat, but I think we can get pretty close. Let's start just from the get-go. I'm just going to open up a default setting. We can worry about settings or sounds later on. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a whole measure, so all 4 counts here. Do Shift-Option-3 to consolidate an empty region. I'm going to open this up, and I've got my roll, my piano roll here. Now, naturally, you could kind of do this with just by playing it on either a drum pad or using your MIDI keyboard, but I want to show you how you can do it even with just a mouse and a keyboard, or like a regular typing keyboard. We're going to go over here to 1, and you'll hear that every key corresponds to, obviously, a different sound on the drum kit. Before we do anything, start drilling this in your head. Drummers have 2 hands, two hands, 2 arms. They can only do so much. It's very common for people to sometimes start building a beat that gets really complicated and crazy way too fast, and it's just not going to be physically possible. That's okay if that's what you're going for, but people are going to subconsciously kind of pick up on the fact that it doesn't sound very natural. They're used to hearing real drummers, and there is limits to a real drummer. So keep that in mind when you're programming. In this case, we're going to start it off super simple with a kick. 4 on the floor. That's going to be on every single beat on a 4/4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm holding control there to kind of bring out this pencil tool, and I can lay down the kick. So what does that sound like? Go over here. Pretty standard, boring 4 on the floor, but we're very quickly able to set a beat. Now, if you have no idea what 4 on the what 4/4 is, or 4 on the floor is, or how to count out time, I recommend checking out the very basics of like just meters in music theory. It's not too complicated, but just to explain it to you really quickly, if I'm saying something's in 4/4, that means that there's 4 beats in a measure. So this measure you can see in Pro Tools, and just about any other program, is also laid out by these lines here. And my subdivision right now is in 16th notes. To make it easier, let's put it in 8th notes, just so you can kind of visualize it a little bit better. You'll see that these darker lines, those are what are going to indicate a new measure. And you'll see that here it says 1/1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and then it repeats to 2/1, 2/2, 2/3, 2/4. That's just marking the different subdivisions, the beats and stuff like that. So this is one measure. We're going to focus on one measure for now. Now, if we double click it again, we've got the 4 on the beat. Generally, when you want to do a really simple beat, your snare that's going to kind of help you mark the beat is going to be on your 2 and 4. It's just the way of life. I'm going to find the snare. Sounds like there's a snare right here, and I'll do another one here. So again, we're going to go That already feels like a beat you've heard a million times. That's cool. I'm not necessarily here to teach you how to make the coolest beats of all time. I'm trying to teach you how to make them sound more realistic. So let's go ahead and do a cool little trick here that you can do. So if you select all of these and you hold Option, which is the command to kind of copy anything that you've selected, you can drag over here. We're going to find a hi-hat. That's a cool hi-hat. And so we're going to play it back here. So now it's giving it a little bit more life. Let's take off the click so we can just hear the drums. And so far, we're still fairly realistic. Let's pretend there's a hi-hat over here and a snare over here. Drummer could do that. Pretty easy. But we want to make it a little bit more exciting. There's still more subdivision that we can break up here. Like I said, we're still in 60th notes. So let's go to 8th notes on the MIDI chart. 8th note subdivision. What can we do there? We can now lay down a hi-hat on the next subdivision. Remember that little trick with the Option here? And now we're going to have some more movement when we hit play. So I know what you're thinking. This sounds not great. Sounds a little bit robotic. So let's pause. That's a pretty standard beat. Just about any drummer is going to be able to play that, and you can already build a song out of this. You know, you can start accenting different things, adding different fills and whatnot, but it doesn't sound realistic yet. It sounds like a drum machine, and not a good one at that. It doesn't even sound, it's a weird mix between something that's trying to sound real and something electronic. Why is that? Because humans aren't perfect. The same way, like, you know, we're limited to just having two hands that can only do so much. We're also not machines in the sense that we're not always going to hit at the exact same strength, or in this case, velocity, which if you don't know what velocity is, it's over here. You can modify this a couple different ways, but Pro Tools lays it out right here to where if I kind of just select this, you know, here getting louder, that's how hard you're hitting. So if I do it right here, it's like really quiet. And by default, it's all going to set it at your default velocity. So as you can see here, everything's at the exact same velocity. So that's as if a drummer was robotically and perfectly playing every single hit at the exact same volume and intensity. And that's just not how drummers can normally play. It's just not really possible. So what do? We try to make it more realistic. There's a couple different things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is if you hold Command, this allows you to kind of modify the velocity of what you're hovering over. So the first thing that's going to help a ton is bringing that velocity in and out for the hi-hat. Now, a drummer also is going to give life and feel to the beat, and so staying straight doesn't feel very groovy. What we can do is bring down every single offbeat a little bit, and we want to do this manually for each individual one so that we're not just all across the board doing the exact same thing, right? So now even just that is already going to help a ton. So you feel like there's a little bit more groove there now. We could even bring it down a little bit more. Right? And so now let's bring up some of this snare. So maybe I want the second hit to be a little bit louder. So now we're getting more of a beat. So now there's more of a groove. There's more, the drums are telling a little bit more of a story in a single measure than they were before. And we're adding more feel, and like let's add maybe some more to the kick. Cool. Already with just velocity, you can see how we're bringing more life into a very, very simple standard beat. So now you're asking, what else can we do to make this feel more real? Depending on the virtual instrument you're using, you should have a couple different options. As you were hearing when I was scrolling through, it's not just kick, hi-hat, snare, crash, whatever, etc., etc. There's multiple variations of the same thing. So I have different snares. You know, I've got different hi-hats. going from very close to all the way open. We've got different rides, whatnot. So the idea here is, again, play around with different options. Don't use the exact same sample all the way through unless you're looking for a very specific sound. So again, think like a drummer. Think about what you might be doing. Maybe you're accenting at the very beginning of every first beat. You want it to be a little bit more aggressive, more punchy. So what are you going to do? You're maybe going to open up the hi-hat a little bit more. And let's turn that a little bit louder. And then maybe as we are going through the beat, we're getting a little bit tighter as we go. And so we're going to go down here. This is all trial and error, but this is just kind of where your headspace should be at. You should always be experimenting and trying different things. But let's see what that sounds like. And let's try, while we're at it, a different snare. So this snare and this snare don't sound too different, but again, any little subtleties will help. So let's listen to that. All right, so that's our basic kind of groove here. Now what we can start doing, now that we've built out a basic groove, we can start duplicating it. Let's do this 4 different measures. And then I like to consolidate it, Command-Shift-Option-3. And so now you see we've got the whole beat repeating. And again, the more repetition you have, the more your mind is going to immediately start picking up like, oh, this is a loop. It sounds exactly the same, and it's going to start sounding robotic. So we're going to want to play around, and this is where it gets a little tedious, but the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. That's just simple like that. So let's go ahead and go through here and modify some of these different velocities. I'm just kind of going at random. It's very small amounts. You see over here we have a lot of repetition. So we can kind of either go like this through here, or you can do it directly on there. Snares to me sound a little bit loud, so I'm gonna bring them down overall. Thought it was a bit intense. So now we've modified the velocities a little bit, but again, it's really subtle at this point, and even if you kind of mess around with them a lot, it's not going to always be super, convincing to some degree. That's only one part of the kind of overall effort here. So what's next? What do? You add some variation. It's that simple. Like, imagine again, put yourself in the shoes of the drummers, close your eyes, visualize it. Think about how quickly you might get bored of doing the exact same thing over and over. Even if you're playing it pretty lively and realistic, if you're just kind of doing this the whole time, like, it's like, I'm itching to do something, maybe a drum fill or something. We can do that. Let's do that. So this is where you, again, start playing around, try different things here. The key to all of this is to never let your beats get too repetitive, and give them some liveliness, give them a little bit of errors and whatnot. So the first one I'm going to start with, an open hi-hat. And then maybe over here I add another snare. Visualizing it always. And so here's another thing. Start thinking like a drummer. Even though drummers tend to have really good independence, they can do multiple things with both hands that are independent of each other. Natural things tend to happen. Like, for example, when I hit a snare, if I'm hitting a hi-hat on the snare at the same time that I'm hitting the hi-hat, because I'm going with a little bit more power on the snare, my right hand kind of sometimes naturally wants to hit a little bit harder. So these two hits, now that I have a snare hit over here, maybe I might go a little bit louder, and maybe even a little bit more open. And so you hear the accent also happening on the hi-hat, and it all helps kind of like blend everything together and feel very natural. And so usually, depending on the drummer and how busy you want the song to be, and when this comes more into the aspect of like arrangement and whatnot, usually every 4 or 8 or 16 measures, you're going to want to generally do some kind of fill so that you don't feel like there's ever it shouldn't feel like a run-on sentence. A fill tends to help to kind of be the period to a sentence, speaking from a drummer's perspective. So in this case, I'm going to do something super simple by adding another hit there. Let's actually break down to 16th notes divisions, because here we can have a little bit more fun. See what that sounds like. Okay, let's go ahead and consolidate. Let's listen to that. So we're already sounding kind of cool here. Cool. So that's already sounding a lot better, a lot more realistic. From this point, I might do things like messing around with the timing. Nobody's always perfectly on time, so it's okay to, like, you know, kind of come over here and rush and kind of push back some of these a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy here because you don't want it to feel off time. And you also don't want to consistently do the same thing. If you start pushing everything back by the exact same amount or pushing it forward by the same amount, you're going to end up with, like, you know, essentially the same thing. It's going to sound robotic. And again, this can be really tedious, but you can push it as little or as much as you want. You don't necessarily have to spend hours on this. It's still going to already be kind of convincing. So already there, I went a little bit too hard, and this could awkwardly enough be a good thing depending for the kind of music you're making. This sounds a little bit more garage bandy, like sloppy, you know, indie rock band. And so sometimes I like to do that. I like to exaggerate a bit, right? And then I like to go to option 0. That's going to bring up our quantize window. And I'm going to go over here to strength, and I'm not going to do 100% because 100% would lock it right to back where it was. It's going to be directly on grid where I had it before. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go over here like maybe like 89%. And so it'll be maybe even less. Let's do 86. And so now it's better, so it won't sound as sloppy. But it's still got some of that, like, kind of like offness that I gave it a little bit earlier. And so that's starting to sound better. There's a lot of little tricks you can do. This is already the basics of how you should approach, like, programming drums. It's a good approach to kind of already be thinking about all these little things and not just get crazy with adding as many possible beats as you can. From here on, usually what I'll do is I'll start duplicating these and, you know, keep customizing where I can. And for example, I'm going to show you now that you have a 4 on the floor beat, how quickly moving around just things as simple as like kicks and stuff can do to change. So let's say I get rid of the 4 on the floor feel and I go more of just like a standard here, like, let's get rid of this kick. Let's just get rid of all these kicks, for example. So now we've got more of an open feel here by just getting rid of a lot of these kicks and letting it just kind of hang. You get more of an open feel. Let's try this. And maybe this looks overwhelming and you won't know exactly where to place kicks and whatnot, but this is just trial and error. This is where you practice, and I recommend watching drummers, learning a little bit more about drumming and stuff. Like I said, this tutorial isn't necessarily about showing you how to make really cool or specific kinds of beats. It's more about the concepts of understanding how you should program drums in MIDI if you're trying to make them sound realistic. So already, like, you're going to hear there's a lot of variation. It's not a big loop, and you're going to see how the feel changes just by moving around the kick in this case. 4 on the floor. Just a little bit more open. Maybe this is a verse. All right. So that's, I guess, the first part of this. I'm going to end it here because I don't want to get too crazy and deep with it. But at the very least, I think this is a great starting point if you're now learning how to program drums on MIDI, or you wanted some tips on how to make them sound more realistic. I'll probably do some more videos like this and try out some different concepts. But that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too ranty. Feel free to give me any feedback you might have, or if you have any requests, I'm also willing to entertain those and give them a shot. So if this is your first time checking out this channel, please go ahead and like it, comment, subscribe. You know, that whole 9 yards. That helps YouTubers out a lot, and I'm just starting this out, so I would appreciate it. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.